Welcome to Joy in the City, True Stories Edition. I'm Lindsay Salyards, and you are about to see what God is doing in our city. Coming up, we'll hear from the creator of this television series, Joy in the City, an explanation of why this is so important in our area and how you can be a part of it.
This was simply because I wanted to highlight what God is doing in a positive way in our community. As we hear people talk about the community, whether it be churches, businesses, schools, we want to do what we can to change the conversation.
All that and more coming up now on Joy in the City, True Stories.
God is on the move, hallelujah. God is on the move in many mighty ways. God is on the move, hallelujah. God is on the move today.
Our feature story discusses the purpose behind the television show you're watching right now. Recently, we sat down with the developer of the show, Troy Ferguson, as he explains the creation of this program. As we begin today, tell our viewers what Joy in the City is all about.
Well, Joy in the City is a television program that airs Monday through Friday. But the concept of why we did this was simply because I wanted to highlight what God is doing in a positive way in our community. Too often I hear bad news about the city. People talking about loss of jobs, loss of this and that, and drugs. And I thought, it's time that we put away the bad news and find some of the good news of our community. So Joy in the City came about because we just wanted to highlight some of the good things that God's doing right here in our community.
There are two different aspects to the program each week. Can you explain to us what they are?
Sure. First of all, it's a program that airs Monday through Friday. On Monday through Thursday, there are sermons from Transformation Church. This is the church that has mainly supported this program from the get-go. And we have messages from Pastor Jim Balzano as well as other pastors and speakers. And that's all through Monday through Thursday. On Friday, we come back with what is called the True Stories edition of the program. And what that is, it's a documentary-style program in which we highlight people and organizations in our area that's having some sort of impact spiritually, specifically to our community.
So why the name Joy in the City?
We took the story found in Acts 8:4, where Philip is preaching and ministering to those in Samaria. Mm-hmm. And as he does so, people are responding, people are being saved. And one of the things it says in Acts 8:8, as a response to all this, there was great joy in the city. So our heart is, the concept that we want to accomplish is, as people hear the message of the good news of what's going on in our city, as people hear stories of testimonies and organizations, there will be a response in our city, and there will be great joy in our city, which is Acts 8:8, hence the title, Joy in the City.
Almost every True Stories episode has several segments as part of the 30-minute program. What are they and why?
Well, first we start off with what is the main story, which is the organization or person we're highlighting. And we go into detail of what they are, what they do, maybe even show different pictures and video clips of their ministry and how they're impacting people. This is usually the first segment, and we go in as in-depth as we can. The second section is more of a testimonies part where we bring someone in and we ask them a few questions, and they just tell us about what God's done in their life personally. It might be connected to the feature story, it might be totally disconnected. But that's a testimonial section. And then the last section, we confront some tough topics, different things in our community that people might like to know more about but are afraid to ask. So we just hit things maybe on the areas of drugs, alcohol, different types of abuse. And we just try to confront those as much as possible. And we get one of the spiritual leaders in our community, such as Pastor Jim or someone else, to highlight a biblical response to those things. So those are the three different portions of the show.
This program has been in existence for about a year. So what kind of response have you been receiving from viewers so far?
Well, it's interesting. We've had people that go to our church. They're going to watch it many times. But we've had people that aren't connected to us whatsoever turning the channel and finding the program one reason or another. And the amazing thing is we've had phone calls right after the show was finished airing. And they call the church and they'll ask questions about what they just saw and how God stirred them. We even had different times we've had people weeping on the telephone about how God moved in them through what they just saw on television. And they may have no connection to us as a church. They may not even really be in the Altoona area, but it's something that they just saw. So the response has been overwhelming. The support has been wonderful, as I know people who have watched this that are connected to us, they continue to do that, and I get emails or text messages about they've enjoyed the show, they watched the show, they love the story, highlighting the organization we did for that day. But the most important thing is the ministry that takes place, the transformation that takes place as people have watched, whether it be the sermon or the true story, and hearing what God has done in those moments. It's been remarkable. So been very good, and looking forward to that in the future.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. So I know that this show is kind of part of a bigger picture for you. Talk to us about what that is.
When we first started this, we weren't thinking of a television show at all, as I mentioned earlier. And what it was is we want to change the conversation about our city. As we hear people talk about the community, whether it be churches, businesses, schools, we want to do what we can to change the conversation. How do we do that? Well, we change the narrative. As the discussions are had, we go in and we talk about what the good things that are happening, what's growing, what's moving forward. And I love to see the things that are downtown that are growing, and God's doing some awesome things downtown. And different parts of our community, people are opening businesses. We got churches, new churches opening up. And many people think, well, this is such a city that's going downhill. My question is, then why are people creating businesses? Why are people opening new churches? And what it is if we can just change the narrative, change the conversation about it, it allows us to change the big picture of what we're doing. And it's not just about creating a television show. My dream is that through this, we can bring awareness to different organizations that are doing great things that maybe people just don't know about. So we bring in a television crew, and we can do a story on them and bring awareness to what they're doing for our community, much bigger than maybe what they can afford to do in themselves. And eventually, I'd like to see us be able to utilize the equipment and the skills we have to develop commercials, to develop documentaries that are put on secular television as well. And in time, we can use our people and our equipment to create short films or full-length feature films, all about changing the narrative, changing the conversation about what we see God doing in our future.
As we wrap up, we want to show our new viewers some excerpts from the True Stories edition of the show to give them an idea about what it's all about. Enjoy.
I think the focus of Day One being that they're trying to bring about the healing that Christ offers is one of the things that sets it apart. I don't think every ministry wants that, but the fact that Day One can be dedicated to that and that is their focus is an awesome resource.
Well, the foundation for us is our counseling, and we never turn anyone away. And in this day and age, when we see so many people suffering from depression, from all sorts of psychological issues that they come in the door with, and so many marital problems today, and addictions to all sorts of things across the spectrum. And they can't afford to go to often a licensed psychologist, or sometimes they may be able to afford that, but they want some a Christian perspective in their counseling. So we provide that, and that really is our foundation. We've done that for a long time.
And so I realize that people need a lot of support to get through difficult situations, that maybe some of it was their own fault, get into addictions and that kind of thing. And so that's what Day One's all about.
The door was started as a place to get kids off the street after school. We're right near a major corner in our town and walking distance of the school, and right outside our building was a place where there might be as many as 40 kids a day congregating and getting into trouble. People drive by, they saw smoking, they saw kids doing stuff, hearing swearing, antisocial things, and they were concerned. And the founder of the ministry, George Palmer, saw them driving by, and instead of just being mad at them, said, we need to find out, why are these kids on a corner? Why aren't they at home? What's going on? And digging deeper, found out home's not always the best place to be after school. Sometimes nobody's home. Sometimes the streets are safer than home. It depended on, each kid's story was different, but they all had one thing in common. They needed a place.
My name's Scott Manganella. I'm the CEO and founder of Precious Life, and have had the privilege of working here since 1986. Precious Life started in 1985 when a group of us met to see what we could do to provide a positive alternative. That was our goal. As a pastor, it was very easy to preach against abortion. Most of my congregation agreed with me, and so that was a simple thing to do. I had a conviction that there must be something more that the church could do. And so in my home church in Portage, back in 1982, we had developed a small program that reached out to young women who were pregnant in the Portage and Ebensburg and Crescent area. And so we decided to try to duplicate that in Altoona and in some other places, and that's how we got our start here in Altoona.
Joshua House is a youth organization that reaches out to kids, teens, young adults, and families, really from the elementary age up through teenagers and beyond. I started it when, it was 18 years ago, as an outreach to kids that were ones that were misplaced or they didn't have a place. And as I walked around the town of Tyrone, God really put a burden on my heart and broke my heart for the kids that didn't have any purpose, any desire, any drive. And really that's where Joshua House comes from. Joshua is the person that led the people out of the wilderness, a place of wandering, and into the promised land. And our passion, our desire, our drive really is to help young people figure out what they're created to do. And so we do that with different platforms. We do that with athletics, we do that in the academics, and we do that as encompassing faith. Providing after school programs of homework club, basketball, running club, discipleship group, different things that we would have throughout the year. We want to see that as those opportunities, or really where God's put his finger, so that we can be a blessing to the kids and build relationship with them, and then help them in their spiritual walk and really understand who they are and then how God's created them.
Well, the Salvation Army actually started in the East End of London back in 1865, and it was William Booth, who was the founder of the Salvation Army, along with his wife Catherine, who saw that there was a need for folks who were living out on the street, who were down on their luck, and really to be able to meet some basic needs for them, because he believed soup, soap, and salvation, that if material needs, those basic things weren't taken care of, how can you tell somebody that God loves them and that God cares for them if we're not caring for them? So that really is the basic premise of the beginnings of the Salvation Army.
The Father's House was a ministry that was set up to help people that were struggling financially, and we wanted to, basically give them, a place that they could come in and get clothing, and also food and household items that they could take home free of charge. And it was a ministry set up to help people.
After our discussion with Pastor John, we took our crew and watched as person after person flooded into the Father's House. They have the opportunity to select clothing, food, and some other household items. Dick Weber talks about his role with the Father's House.
I'm called the director of the Father's House, and I pretty much coordinate everybody else's stuff. I've got, as Judy said, real good people. And we get a variety of people. It's not always the same person doing the same thing, so they're pretty well cross-trained. And my favorite day is like today, when I have somebody doing each of the functions, and I can just keep an eye on things to make sure we still have enough of this and that on the table and different things. And sometimes Judy will ask me a question about requirements or something, and we had a couple social workers come in today, and we give them a certain priority, and they know that they can come to us on a short notice. And whoever set our hours up years back did so very conveniently because they cover the working poor as well. In other words, people that normally would work during the day or during the night or something like that. And caseworkers know that they can get in here with them, and their word and their letterhead is enough to get them a food order if they're in the Altoona area.
The scripture did apply to my life. I accomplished great endeavors after visiting Day One, with God leading and directing my steps through Sharon. I wrote and filed court petitions. I represented myself in a court of law. I established a corporation. I learned to hang drywall, and I ripped up flooring. So remember, when you enter through the doors at Day One, it's day one of the best and rest of your life.
Just the first night, I was in tears because she just, plain and simple, told me how much God loved me, and I never really thought about that, and I really needed to hear that at that time.
I just didn't really have a lot of connections with kids in Bellwood, and I just wanted to find somewhere where I could be and be happy, so.
Well, it's brought me closer, I believe, to God than I've been before, because before we've gone to church, but we stopped, and it's just, I've always seen God as something I'd never been really close to or gotten involved with, but it's gotten me closer to that and trying to connect my life more to the spiritual aspect of it.
My mom was 16 and she found herself pregnant. So my mom grew up in a real Christian home, and so she was afraid to go to her parents and say, hey, I messed up, I'm pregnant, because she was afraid of the way that they would see her. She was afraid of the shame and the guilt that she thought that her parents would put on her. So she decided by herself, I don't think the guy had any say in it, that she was going to go to Pittsburgh and get an abortion. So she was talking to her cousin, and so she was like, hey, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh and get an abortion. Can you come and drive me home afterward? And so my cousin her cousin ended up saying something to my grandparents, her parents. And my grandpa was friends with Scott Manganella, who runs Precious Life. So Scott came over one night and talked to my mom, and he didn't even get to show her any videos or anything because my mom was like, I don't want to see it. I've kind of made my decision. I don't really want to see any of this. In all reality, she didn't want to see it because she didn't want to face the reality of the decision she was about to make. And Scott tells me to this day, he said, Trevor, I left that night. I left my friend's house thinking I'm going to quit ministry because I can't even help my friend and his daughter. So why would I even continue to do this? And so eventually my mom put off the appointment a week, and my grandpa called Scott and he said, hey, she put it off a week, and they said, okay, good. So let's just kind of encourage her and say, let's not try to force anything or make anything happen. And then eventually she just continued to put it off until it wasn't the decision anymore.
I was actually in treatment, and I was looking for an opportunity to go somewhere after my recovery. And everything I planned fell through, so I approached Pastor Jim, asked him for a blessing, and he pretty much just told me about the opportunity the Foundry had opening. The best part of being at the Foundry would be that I have an opportunity to find God again. I was lost along the way during my addiction, and I figure this as a second chance. It took a long time for me to admit what I was going through in life and just admit the type of person that I was and the havoc I caused in my life and people's lives. But until I realized I needed help, and I eventually did surrender to getting help, that's the one thing you have to do.
Each program, we try to address a tough question that is relative to our culture. A few months back, we had a lot of anger and bitterness that we saw on television and social media concerning some of the tragedies across our country. Given recent activities, we have a similar reaction now in our country. So we wanted to take this excerpt from a live service at Pleasant Valley Assembly on how we, as the body of Christ, should respond to issues such as what we see right now and we hear about today.
And I was coming home and was thinking about that stuff, and the Lord put a thought in my mind that I'm kind of weird, and God gives me weird thoughts because I'm weird. But here was the phrase that kept going through my mind: don't feed the animals. Don't feed the animals. And you see that sign, oftentimes you'll see it sometimes at zoos, and sometimes you'll see it in places where people want to get close to wild animals, maybe bears or something like that, and all of a sudden you want to start feeding those wild animals. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And you go to feed those wild animals, and people do, and all of a sudden sometimes the wild animal that they're feeding and thinking they're having fun with turns on them and injures them and bites them. The reason you don't feed the animal is for your safety and their safety. And I've been thinking about, so what am I supposed to do with that, Lord? And here was the thought that came up, is that there is an animal trying to destroy our nation. There is an animal trying to destroy our nation. I don't know what the animal would be called, but I know its attributes. I know its character traits. I know what it's made of. I know what feeds it. And I know that hate feeds the animal. I know that anger feeds the animal. I know that racism feeds the animal. Prejudice feeds the animal. I know that politicizing events feeds the animal. And I would appeal to you as the people of God that you would not feed the animal, that you would not return hate for hate, that you would not return anger for anger, that you would not return racism for racism, that you would not return prejudice for prejudice, that you would not get into the political debate. Listen to me, it is not the time to politicize these events. It is now is the time to mourn. Now is the time to weep together, collectively. Bear with me for a moment. 3 years ago, son died. No answer still, but that's not the point. Stood in a funeral home with my wife, my daughter, and my son-in-law. Before everybody came, and I held hands with them. I said, we're going to pray. And I says, now listen to me. We all know that there's going to be people, hundreds of people are going to come through here in the next 2 days. And there are going to be people that are part of his past, people that you really don't like, people who he has contributed to their lives and they've contributed to his lives. And there's going to be people come through here that you just really would rather not talk to and not like. Now is not the time. We will handle each and every person that comes through here with grace, love, and dignity. And we will help them walk through the process of mourning. Now is not the time to fight. Now is not the time to be angry. Now is the time to mourn collectively. This is not the time for a nation to start casting blame. This is not the time for a nation to feed the animal. This is the time for the nation to starve the animal. That we grieve with a mother who lost a son in Minnesota, with somebody who lost a son in Dallas, and somebody who lost sons in New Orleans, or Louisiana. This is not the time to dismiss it lightly. This is a time to mourn and to grieve together as a nation. There is an animal that is destroying our people, our nations, and is trying to destroy our children. And I got to tell you, it is a time to collectively mourn and grieve and feel and share the grief. Therefore, to starve this animal that's trying to destroy our nation. And I appeal to this body, starve the animal.
I don't know that people understand that it's okay to talk about abortion with a young girl. Doesn't mean you're condoning her having the abortion.
That we need to love on them, just 100% love on them. I think that we need to tell them the truth about all what that encompasses.
In every ministry, you come up with the kid that's the problem, that you wish didn't show up every week at church, because they just make your job tougher. They disrupt things. They don't listen. Or they're the invisible kid who just sits in the back and they never say anything, and they don't play the games, and they don't get involved. And one thing that we've learned in our culture is that the invisible kid will one day become the very visible kid. He'll be the one who shoots up a school. He'll be the one who commits suicide or overdoses. He'll be the one who winds up a teenage father. He'll be the one who makes a headline for all the wrong reasons.
Those were some incredible stories that we've seen featured so far on Joy in the City. If someone misses an episode, is there somewhere they can go to see it after the fact?
Sure. Joy in the City actually has their own YouTube channel called Joy in the City, where you can watch all the stories, all the true stories that we've had over the last year, and the coming up year and so forth, we'll put them on there as well. So just search for Joy in the City, you can find all those stories. We also have a Facebook page, also called Joy in the City, and if you go to that, you can see all the different events and things that we might highlight, as well as our stories when we've put them on television. We put them on Facebook, as well as YouTube. So you can go back as far as last year and watch all the episodes we've done. And occasionally we actually will re-air them for people who might have missed them. We'll do a re-airing once in a while, but for the most part, they can watch them at any time on YouTube or Facebook.
So how can our audience get involved or contribute to Joy in the City?
Well, there's actually several ways. First of all, I'd love to hear from our viewers of stories of organizations that they know of, maybe that I don't have a relationship with, that they could say, check this group out, this organization that has had an impact on me or my family. Check them out. I'm open to all kind of ideas and stories, and they can do that by simply emailing us at info@jointhecity.org, and we'll read through those, make some contacts, and do that kind of stuff. Also, if people have a personal story or a testimony they'd like to share, something that God has done in their life, and we could share it as a story on the broadcast, we'd like to hear from them as well. Here again, info@jointhecity.org is easy enough for them to contact me with that. Another way people can contribute, obviously, is financially. It's not free to do all this, and right now, primarily, what we do is underwritten by Transformation Church. We have a few people that have given some funds here and there, but if anybody wants to give towards the program, for us to grow, develop a crew and so forth would be phenomenal. And they could ask me some personal questions about that. I'd be glad to fill them in. So contributions in that realm would be wonderful. But what I really want is to hear from people of what this show is meaning to them, how it has impacted them, as well as how they can come alongside and connect with us in their stories, their organizations. And they can email me or they can call the office. Our office number is 944-1948. And ask for Troy, and I'd be glad to talk with them, and we'll do whatever we can to connect them.
Thank you for taking time to explain to us what Joy in the City is all about. We are definitely looking forward to hearing more about what God is doing in our community. That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching Joy in the City, True Stories. I want to encourage you to join us every weekday at 9 a.m. We'll start the week off with a recent message from Transformation Church, Monday and Tuesday morning. On Wednesday and Thursday morning, at the same time, we'll dig into the archives and other messages, testimonies, and ministry programs. And finally, we'll conclude the week with another inspirational story, such as you saw today. So be sure to tune in every weekday at 9 o'clock for Joy in the City. Be encouraged, because God is moving in our city.
God is on the move.